being used now. They require software programming, they're extremely stable, and they're versatile. This book was written a while ago, so we shouldn't even be mentioning that. That's the advantage of beamformers, is that they're digital, because we live in a digital world. Almost everything is digital now. Man, this Faye gave me this lemon cucumber water. It's A1. It's A1. Alright, guys. So, the beamformer also has a switch, guys. It also has a switch. Why? Because it functions doing both transmission and reception. So it has a switch. So the beamformer, this is a transmit receive switch, and during transmission, because our voltages are very high, right? We get our voltages from our pulser. Our pulser is sending high voltages to our beamformer, right? The switch protects the voltages from the ultrasound system. Protects the voltages from the ultrasound system to the transducer, because those voltages are so high. It's going to protect that transducer. Okay, so during transmission, the voltages from the ultrasound system to the transducer are very high. During reception, the voltage from the transducer back to the ultrasound system are extremely low. All right, so the switch protects the sensitive electrical components in the receiver by high voltages during transmission. Okay, here we have our pulsar right here, very high voltages right here. Here's our digitizer or our beamformer, right? And while we're getting these high voltages from the pulsar, this digitizer is gonna go to the digitizer, it's gonna go to the transducer, right? That transducer is gonna scan the patient, it's gonna come back to the beamformer before it goes to the receiver. Okay, this switch protects this receiver from those high voltages. All right. Okay. So I can just draw me like a little switch here. Opens and closes. Right. So it's closed when it's during transmission, and it'll open up for the reception of the signals during reception.
Just like heart valve.
Yeah, it's like a heart valve. It's like a heart valve. Okay. It also directs the electrical signals from the transducer to the appropriate electronic and processing components. Okay. Meaning that our signals won't just go back to the pulsar. Okay. It's going to close that channel off and let that signal come back to the beamformer, to the digitizer, or to the receiver. But most importantly, know that the switch in the beamformer, it protects the receiver from those high voltages, and it functions during transmission and reception. Okay. And then just a recap of what a channel is. Again, guys, this signal right here is coming from where? Our original electrical signal is coming from where?
Pulsar.
The pulsar, right? The pulsar is going to send the signal, the electrical signal, to the beamformer. The beamformer is going to decide how this electrical signal is going to be distributed among these active elements. All right? So, this channel is made up of the system electronics, the beamformer, and the pulsar, these wires, and the active elements within those transducers, within that transducer. Most systems have between 32 and 256 channels. That sounds about right? Because that's about the range of how many active elements there are in different transducers, correct? Okay. Guys, before I move on, any questions about the beamformer, please ask me. Any questions about the pulsar, please ask me. Okay? Because remember I said this chapter is all about the pulsar, the beamformer, and the receiver, correct? So I want to make sure we square before I even get to the receiver. We good at it? President? Vice President? Samin? Farnaz? Ubali? Sophie? You good? Okay. Jasmine, Pat? Myra, Win? Do it?
Maybe.
Ask me now. We're gonna have time for questions on on Friday too. I mean on Monday too. But definitely, I don't want to move on unless you guys understand.
Then we have second half.
Question? What's up, Uber?
The beamformer is inside the transducer?
No, the beamformer is in this machine.
Oh, so it's coming from the machine to the transducer?
The beamformer and the pulsar are in that machine.
Oh,
Those signals are sent through the wire of the transducer to the active elements.
Oh, okay.
So that beamformer and that pulsar are actually in the actual machine.
So when it's transmitting and receiving, transmission and receiving, it's able to display a better image on the screen, or what is it doing as far as presenting the image on the display?
What's that?
The beamformer. How does it
The
work?
beamformer is a separate component from the display. We're gonna talk about the display next chapter. Well, the next test. Or the next test. Okay. Because from the beamformer it goes to the receiver, then it goes to the display, then it goes to the storage. Okay?
But its major role is to do what?
The beamformer is to control the electrical signals sent from the pulsar, and those complex signals sent to the active elements is gonna control that. It's gonna effectively steer that beam, the apodization during transmission.
Isn't that depends on the kind of the transducer you're using, or it's just?
Definitely, it's gonna adjust it. No matter anytime we change the beamformer automatically gonna adjust to compensate for whatever transducer is selected. That's a good question. That's a good question. Any other questions, Myra? Okay, guys.
So after receiving back to the beamformer, those electrical signals will be amplified to the receiver.
No, they're going to be sent to the receiver. The receiver is going to amplify them.
Okay.
The receiver is going to manipulate those electrical signals. The beamformer is just going to receive them. It's going to receive those electrical signals and send them to the receiver for like processing, right? To amplify. Because remember, those signals are super weak coming back, right? We're getting less than 1% of our transmitted signal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when those signals come back because of attenuation, both ways, we're gonna get a very weak signal. Okay, that's what the receiver's for. It's to help amplify those signals so we're able to see them for display. Otherwise, if we didn't have a receiver, we wouldn't have signal strength strong enough to visualize anything.
So what dynamic, those two dynamic working for?
With dynamic frequency,
Yeah.
dynamic focusing, I mean,
No, the reception dynamic upper.
it's controlling the number of PZT receiving the reflected sound beams. Okay, that's what the beamformer does. So to keep the beam narrow during transmission and reception, it's gonna effectively decide, hey, I don't want to use all 256 active elements. I only want to use 50 during reception.
Okay.
Okay, because I want to keep my beam narrow and I want to keep my lateral resolution accurate.
Okay.
Good question, dude. Good question. Any other questions, guys? No? So, without further ado, the receiver, guys. We've already talked about the the pulsar, and the beamformer. Okay? Now we're going to talk about the receiver. Okay? Receiver is one of the most important parts in the ultrasound system. It's the one that's most manipulated by us. Okay? People don't always use the function of the receiver, but you guys use one every single day. Every single day, you guys use one. Okay? So the receiver prepares the information from those minuscule reflected signals for eventual display on our monitor. Okay? So it's basically going to process our reflected sound beam, or our reflected electrical signals, right? Because our sound beams are going to vibrate the PZT. The PZT is going to effectively use the piezoelectric effect and turn those sound waves into electrical signals. Those electrical signals are going to be received by the beamformer. That beamformer is effectively going to send those to the receiver. Basically, like I said, for preparation or processing for display, so we can see what we're doing. Okay? So this is the order of operations, guys. There's 5 components within the receiver. It's 5 components within the receiver. Okay? These components are listed right here. 5 operations. These operations must be performed in the appropriate order for the system to function properly. All of these operations right here have to go in the same order, right there. We start with amplification. We have to start with that because we're getting those weak signals back, right? So we need something that's going to amplify our sound signal. That's the same thing that happens in X-ray. You know, I forget what it's called now, but when those X-ray photons hit the X-ray photons attenuate too. They lose energy over time as they travel. Okay, so when they hit that imaging plate, it's something in the system that's going to amplify those photons. Same thing we have right here. So our first receiver operation is going to be amplification. Our second is compensation. Our third one is compression. Fourth is demodulation, and the fifth is going to be reject. Guys, there's synonymous terms with almost every single one of those. You guys are responsible for knowing those as well. You never know how the registry is going to ask you. What if I'm saying, oh yeah, that's dynamic range. You have to know which receiver function that is and what it does. Okay? But those are our 5 operations right there. Okay? They're easy to remember, guys. They're easy to remember because all of them they come in alphabetical order. The sequence of those words are in alphabetical order, right? When we look at them, amplification, compensation, compression, demodulation, and reject, they're all in alphabetical order. So it's the easiest way to know and memorize those the order of operations, as you would call it. Okay? So again, that's super important that you know that. Okay? So let's start with the first receiver function, guys. Receiver operation would be compression. It's going to enlarge each signal equally and identically returning from the transducer. Okay? It's going to enlarge each signal equally and identically returning from the transducer. All right? It's required because the electrical signals are so low upon reception, and if we didn't amplify them, we wouldn't have any image displayed on the monitor. Okay? So that's the first thing that's going to happen is that all of our signals that are being received, they have to be amplified. Okay? But they're going to be amplified equally and identically. Meaning that if I have a signal coming back at 10 and one signal coming back at 5, if all those signals are being doubled, now my signal is going to be 20 and 10, right? It's not going to amplify the weaker signals more than amplify the higher signals. Each signal is going to be amplified to the same degree. Okay? So that's the amplification right there. Our synonym for that, guys, is going to be receiver gain. You guys know it as gain or the 2D button, right? So when I have my receiver gain, you guys, let's check it out. My whole image is getting bright to the same degree, right? Like when I have it down, I don't see anything in the far field, right? That's why it takes so long for me to see anything, because it's not like it's going to amplify the far field faster than it amplifies the near field. It's going to amplify it to the same degree. Okay? So that's why it appears that way. This is the button, when we say, oh, increase your gain, that's this button. That's the receiver gain. That's what you're doing. You're amplifying the received signals. Okay? That's your 2D button right there on this machine. The 2D button, that's your amplification. Also known as receiver gain. Yes, ma'am.
The 2D button, amplification.
You can. Or the receiver gain button.
Highlight that in the test?
On the test?
The registry?
They may say the amplification. They may call it receiver gain. Yeah. They won't call it 2D button. Remember, there's no uniformity when it comes to labeling these ultrasound machines. So it won't be called, it's just called the 2D button on this machine. And it's only called the 2D button because it does grayscale. Really, it's a dual function button, right? I can push it and I can turn it, right? So it's called 2D because when I have all of my stuff on, when I hit 2D, it's gonna go back to a 2D image, just the grayscale image. So we just call it a 2D button, but that's really the receiver gain button as well, or the receiver gain knob as well. Okay? But that's a synonym right there. Receiver gain. They won't say 2D, right? They're just gonna call it receiver gain or amplification. Remember, that's our first step. That's the first operation of the receiver, is to amplify all of our signals